Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking you all on a journey through time to explore the fascinating world of the Song Dynasty in China, a period spanning from 960 to 1279 CE.
A period often overshadowed by others, but brimming with innovation, cultural brilliance, and yes, even some political drama.
We'll be using excerpts from the Wikipedia article on the Song Dynasty as our guide, so get ready to unearth some remarkable facts about a dynasty that left a lasting impact on China and the world.
Prepare to be surprised. The Song Dynasty wasn't just about emperors and battles. It was a time of groundbreaking advancements that still resonate today.
All right, let's set the scene. We're in China just after the chaotic 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. Imagine rival kingdoms, constant warfare, not exactly a peaceful time.
It was a period of fragmentation and instability, and from this chaos emerged Emperor Taizu of Song, a figure with ambition as vast as the territory he sought to unite.
And he did. Emperor Taizu managed to seize the throne from the later Zhou dynasty and embark on a series of conquests, ultimately bringing much of China under the Song banner.
Thus began the Song Dynasty, with its capital established in the northern city of Bianjing, known today as Kaifeng. This marked the start of the Northern Song period, the first chapter in their story.
But as with any good story, there's a twist. Later on, they were pushed south, leading to the Southern Song period, with a new capital in Linan, present-day Hangzhou.
This division into northern and southern periods highlights the geopolitical pressures they faced, particularly from powerful dynasties to the north.
Speaking of neighbors, the Song dynasty wasn't exactly playing it solo on the world stage, were they?
Not at all. They were engaged in a complex web of international relations and trade. Imagine, the Song dynasty had connections stretching from Chola India in the south to the Fatimid Caliphate of Egypt in the west.
Wow, that's quite a reach.
And it doesn't stop there. They traded with Srivijaya in Southeast Asia, the Karakhanid Khanate in Central Asia, Goryeo in Korea, and even had diplomatic exchanges with an embassy from the Byzantine Empire.
They were truly global players. But as we know, it's often the neighbors who keep things interesting, right?
Absolutely. The Song dynasty had this constant push and pull with neighboring states, most notably the Khitans of the Liao dynasty to the northeast and the Tangids of the Western Xia to the northwest. It was a delicate balancing act of warfare and diplomacy.
It sounds like a real headache. Let's start with the Liao dynasty. How did that relationship play out?
With the Liao, it was a turbulent relationship marked by both conflict and attempts at peaceful coexistence. The Song harbored ambitions of retaking the 16 prefectures, a strategically important region that had been lost to the Khitans. They launched several campaigns, but ultimately failed to achieve their objective.
So what happened? Did they just resign themselves to this loss?
Not quite. They eventually recognized the need for a more pragmatic approach. In 1005, they negotiated the Shanyuan Treaty with the Liao dynasty. While the treaty required the Song to pay annual tributes, it also formally recognized the Liao as equals.
So a bit of a compromise, but it sounds like peace had a price tag.
It did. But this seemingly peaceful resolution would later foreshadow the conflict that would erupt with the Jurchens, who would eventually overthrow the Liao and pose a significant threat to the Song themselves.
So the seeds of future conflict were sown even in this treaty. What about the Western Xia? Was that a more amicable relationship?
Unfortunately, no. The Song dynasty also faced challenges from the Tangids of the Western Xia. While they did achieve some notable victories, particularly under the leadership of the brilliant strategist and scientist Shen Kuo, internal conflicts and insubordination within their own ranks hampered their efforts.
So even with brilliant minds leading the charge, internal divisions could undermine their military campaigns. It sounds like a recurring theme.
It does highlight how internal stability plays a critical role in a dynasty's ability to project power and defend its interests.
And they weren't just dealing with the Liao and the Western Xia, were they? Didn't they also have some conflicts with the Vietnamese kingdom of Avit?
That's right. Border disputes. And the Song's decision to cut off trade with Avit sparked a war that lasted from 1075 to 1077. It began with a devastating Vietnamese raid into Guangxi, a provocation that the Song couldn't ignore.
So this wasn't just a minor border skirmish.
Not at all. The Song retaliated with force, sending their commander Guo Quy deep into Vietnamese territory, even reaching their capital, Tan Long, present-day Hanoi. But both sides suffered heavy losses, and eventually a truce was reached in 1082. They agreed to withdraw exchange prisoners and return any captured territories.
It seems like these external conflicts were a constant drain on the Song dynasty. But while they were busy fighting on multiple fronts, what was happening within their own borders?
Well, here's where things get even more interesting. Despite these external pressures, the Song dynasty was experiencing a period of unprecedented economic growth and social change. However, as you might imagine, such rapid development often comes with its own set of challenges.
So it wasn't just enemy armies they had to worry about, but also the growing pains of a rapidly changing society.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
By the 11th century, political divisions had emerged within the Song court, reflecting contrasting viewpoints on how to manage their increasingly complex society and booming economy. Think of it as a clash of ideologies, a battle of ideas about the best path forward.
So it's a battle on two fronts, one against external enemies and another against internal disagreements. Who were the key figures in this internal struggle?
Two individuals stand out. Fan Zhongyan and Wang Anqi. Fan Zhongyan, a true idealist, championed what we call the kingly reforms. He sought to improve the recruitment of officials, boost the salaries of lower-ranking officials, and create programs to make education more accessible, essentially trying to ensure a wider pool of talent for government service.
Sounds like a forward-thinking agenda for the time. Did his reforms succeed?
He faced considerable resistance from those who preferred the status quo and was eventually forced out of office. However, his ideas planted the seeds for further reform efforts, which is where Wang Anqi enters the picture.
Oh, Wang Anqi, the famous reformer. I've heard his name before. What was his approach?
Wang Anqi had bold ideas about addressing what he perceived as corruption and inefficiency within the government. With the backing of Emperor Shenzong, he introduced a wave of reforms known as the New Policies.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. What exactly did these new policies entail?
These reforms were quite comprehensive, encompassing land tax reforms, government monopolies aimed at stabilizing prices, support for local militias, and tougher standards for the imperial examinations. His aim was to ensure that those in power were truly capable and that the government operated more effectively.
Such sweeping changes must have created quite a stir.
You're absolutely right. These reforms led to deep divisions within the Song court. Wang Anqi's supporters, the so-called reformers or the New Policies group, clashed with a conservative faction led by the historian and chancellor Sima Guang.
So the Song court was essentially split into two opposing camps. I imagine that didn't make for a very harmonious political environment.
It was a time of intense political rivalry. As one faction gained power, they often demoted their rivals and exiled them to remote corners of the empire.
A political game of musical chairs with very high stakes. And it sounds like this infighting had some unfortunate casualties. Didn't the famous poet and statesman Su Shi get caught in the crossfire?
He did. Su Shi was a vocal critic of Wang Anqi's reforms and was ultimately jailed and exiled for his outspokenness.
That's tragic. His writings are still celebrated today. It's a reminder that even brilliant minds could get caught up in the political turmoil of the time.
Indeed. And unfortunately for the Song, these divisions would have lasting consequences. While the Song court was preoccupied with these internal struggles, a new threat was brewing on the horizon that would change the course of their history.
This sounds ominous. What was on the horizon?
Remember the Jurchens we mentioned earlier? The ones who had been a subject tribe of the Liai dynasty? Well, they had grown increasingly powerful and resentful of their subjugation.
Ah, I see where this is going. Rebellion.
Precisely. They rebelled, established their own Jin dynasty, and set their sights on toppling the Liao. The Song, seeing an opportunity to weaken a longtime rival, decided to form an alliance with the Jurchens.
An alliance of convenience, perhaps?
Indeed. And initially it proved successful. The combined might of the Song and the Jurchens brought about the downfall of the Liao dynasty in 1125. But this victory would prove to be a double-edged sword.
Oh, how so?
Remember that massive defensive forest the Song had built along the border with the Liao? Well, in order to attack the Liao, they had to remove it, leaving themselves vulnerable.
That doesn't sound like the most strategic move.
It wasn't. The Jurchens, having witnessed the Song army's performance firsthand, realized just how vulnerable they were without that defensive barrier.
I have a feeling this backfired spectacularly.
You guessed it. The Jurchens, sensing an opportunity, launched a surprise attack sweeping across the North China Plain with remarkable speed.
What happened to the Song? Did they manage to repel this attack?
It was a devastating blow. In a shocking turn of events known as the Jingkang Incident, the Jurchens captured the Song capital Kaifeng, along with Emperor Huzong, his successor, Emperor Qinzong, and a significant portion of the imperial court.
Wow, what a dramatic reversal of fortune. So what became of the Song dynasty? Did they simply disappear?
Not quite, but this marked a major turning point in their history.
Welcome back to the deep dive. When we left off, the Song dynasty was reeling from that devastating Jurchen invasion and the capture of their capital, Kaifeng. It's a moment that could have spelled the end for any dynasty.
Indeed. But what's remarkable about the Song is their resilience. They adapted, they innovated, and they continue to thrive, albeit in a new southern chapter of their history.
So let's dive into this Southern Song period. How did they manage to regroup and reestablish themselves after such a catastrophic loss?
Well, the remnants of the Song court, along with Emperor Gaozong, retreated south across the Yangtze River, establishing a new capital in Lenin, present-day Hangzhou.
So a strategic retreat, trading space for time, but they didn't just sit back and wait for the next attack, did they?
Not at all. They knew that survival depended on strengthening their defenses and bolstering their economy. They had to adapt to a smaller territory and make the most of their resources.
What were some of the key strategies they employed to achieve this?
Well, they had some skilled military leaders like Yu Fei and Han Shizong, who played a crucial role in holding back the Jin. But the Southern Song also recognized the importance of another strategic asset, their maritime prowess.
Ah, so they turned their attention to the sea, recognizing its potential for both defense and trade. Smart move considering their new geographical location.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They invested heavily in shipbuilding, upgraded their harbors, constructed seaport warehouses, and even established beacons to guide maritime trade. They understood that a robust navy and a thriving seaborne trade network were vital for their survival and prosperity.
It's amazing how they transformed a strategic disadvantage into a source of strength. It sounds like they weren't just reacting to threats, but actively shaping their future. What was their navy like? Could it really hold its own against powerful enemies?
Oh, their navy was a force to be reckoned with. In 1132, they formally established China's first permanent standing navy, headquartered in Dinghai. And get this, they had these incredible paddle-wheel-driven warships armed with traction trebuchets launching gunpowder bombs.
Gunpowder bombs. That sounds incredibly advanced for the time. It seems like they were at the forefront of military technology.
They were. And these weapons, combined with the maneuverability of their paddle-wheel ships, proved devastatingly effective. A prime example is the Battle of Tangdao and Kaihish in 1161, where they faced off against a much larger Jin fleet on the Yangtze River.
Okay, let's talk numbers. Just how lopsided was this battle?
The Jin forces boasted 70,000 men on 600 warships, while the Song had a mere 3,000 men on 120 ships.
Those are some seriously daunting odds. How on earth did they manage to pull off a victory?
It was a testament to their naval technology and tactics. The gunpowder bombs wreaked havoc on the tightly packed Jin fleet, and the nimble paddle-wheel ships allowed the Song to outmaneuver their opponents. These victories solidified the importance of a strong navy for the Southern Song. Within a century, their navy had swelled to 52,000 fighting Marines. Talk about a maritime powerhouse.
It's truly remarkable how they adapted and innovated to defend themselves. But building and maintaining such a powerful navy must have been incredibly expensive. How did they fund all of this?
They made some tough decisions. Some might even say controversial. The government confiscated land from wealthy landowners, particularly those connected to officials who were dodging taxes to raise funds for these military and infrastructure projects.
I can imagine that didn't go over well with the elites. It sounds like a recipe for resentment and maybe even instability.
It certainly created tension and likely contributed to a loss of loyalty among some powerful families. However, the Southern Song government deemed these measures necessary for the survival of the dynasty. After all, they weren't just facing internal challenges. A new threat was emerging from the north that would test their resilience like never before.
You're talking about the Mongols, right? The legendary or perhaps infamous Genghis Khan and his unstoppable hordes?
Precisely. The Mongols, under the leadership of Genghis Khan, were sweeping across Asia, leaving a trail of conquered empires in their wake. It was only a matter of time before their ambitions turned towards China.
So how did the Song respond to this looming threat? Did they try to fortify their borders and prepare for a massive invasion?
Their initial strategy might surprise you. They actually formed an alliance with the Mongols.
An alliance with the Mongols? That seems counterintuitive given their reputation for ruthlessness.
It was a strategic move, a calculated risk aimed at taking down a common enemy, the Jin Dynasty. And you know what? It actually worked. By 1234, both the Jin and the Western Xia dynasties had fallen to the Mongol hordes.
So problem solved, right? The Jin were gone, the Mongols were their allies, everyone could breathe a sigh of relief and enjoy peace and prosperity.
If only history were that simple. The Song, emboldened by the Jin's collapse, decided to take back their former imperial capitals, Kaifeng Luoyang and Chang'an. And this, my friend, proved to be a fatal miscalculation.
I have a feeling this didn't sit well with their Mongol allies.
You guessed it, the fragile alliance shattered. The Song had essentially awakened a sleeping giant. Kublai Khan, the new great Khan of the Mongol Empire, was not one to forgive such a transgression. He saw the Song's actions as a betrayal and a direct challenge to his authority.
So the Song, perhaps a bit overconfident from their previous victory, had inadvertently made themselves the next target of the Mongol war machine.
Precisely. Kublai Khan declared the creation of the Yuan dynasty in 1271 and set his sights on conquering the Song once and for all.
So the Song now faced the full might of the Mongol Empire, led by one of the most ambitious and ruthless leaders in history. What chance did they have?
It was a David and Goliath scenario, and sadly for the Song, the outcome was predictable. After a series of brutal campaigns, Kublai Khan's forces slowly but surely chipped away at the Song's defenses. By 1276, most of their territory, including their capital Linen, had fallen.
A tragic turn of events. So did the Song simply surrender? Or did they fight to the bitter end?
They chose defiance.
Yeah.
The final showdown came in 1279 at the Battle of Yamen on the Pearl River Delta. It was a desperate last stand, a clash of civilizations, and tragically it ended in a crushing defeat for the Song. The last Song emperor, a 13-year-old boy named Zhao Bing, committed suicide rather than face capture, along with his prime minister and 1,300 members of the royal clan.
A heartbreaking end to a dynasty that had achieved so much. It's hard to imagine the despair and the sense of loss they must have felt in those final moments.
It was a poignant and tragic end to a remarkable era. While Kublai Khan did spare the rest of the former imperial family, the Song dynasty, after over 3 centuries of innovation and cultural brilliance, was no more.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the Song's rise to power and their impressive achievements to their struggles against external threats and ultimately their fall to the Mongols. But it seems like we focus mostly on the political and military aspects of their history.
You're right. It's easy to get caught up in the grand narratives of emperors and battles. But what truly fascinates me about the Song dynasty is the vibrant and dynamic society that thrived amidst all the turmoil.
Yes, let's shift our focus and explore what life was like for everyday people during this period. What was Song dynasty society like?
That's what I find most captivating about the Song dynasty. Amidst all those external pressures and internal conflicts, they managed to foster a society brimming with life culture and innovation.
It's almost like a paradox, isn't it? How could a society facing such adversity create such a vibrant and flourishing culture?
Perhaps it was their resilience, their ability to adapt and innovate that fueled their creativity. Or maybe it was a way to find solace and meaning in a world filled with uncertainty. Whatever the reason, the Song dynasty left an indelible mark on Chinese history, not just for its military and political achievements, but also for its contributions to art, literature, science, and technology.
So let's paint a picture for our listeners. What would it have been like to walk the streets of a Song dynasty city?
Imagine bustling marketplaces, a constant flow of goods from all corners of China and beyond. There were specialized markets for everything you could imagine. Silks, spices, porcelain tea, you name it. The streets were crowded with merchants, artisans, entertainers, and people from all walks of life.
Sounds like a sensory overload in the best possible way. And it wasn't just about commerce, right? What about entertainment and social life? Did the people of the Song dynasty know how to have fun?
Oh, they had that in spades. The Song dynasty is known for its rich entertainment scene. People could enjoy theatrical performances, puppet shows, acrobatics, storytelling music, and even sporting events. Imagine tea houses buzzing with conversation restaurants, offering all sorts of regional delicacies and public festivals, illuminating the city with lanterns and fireworks.
I'm starting to get a real sense of what a vibrant and sophisticated society they had. It sounds like a fascinating blend of tradition and innovation. But let's talk about the social structure. How was it organized?
Well, like many Chinese dynasties, the Song dynasty had a hierarchical social structure. At the top, you had the emperor and the royal family, followed by the scholar official class, who held immense power and prestige.
The scholar officials, those were the individuals who passed the notoriously difficult imperial examinations, right? The ones that required years of dedicated study and tested a wide range of subjects from Confucian classics to poetry and calligraphy.
Precisely. Passing those exams was seen as the ultimate achievement, a gateway to power and social mobility. It was a grueling process, but for those who succeeded, it opened doors to a world of privilege and influence.
It sounds incredibly competitive.
Huh?
I can only imagine the pressure those candidates must have felt.
You're right. Thousands of hopeful candidates would cram for years, hoping to earn a coveted government position. And the Song government took education seriously. They set up schools, supported libraries, and even implemented social welfare programs like retirement homes, public clinics, and graveyards for the poor.
So they weren't just focused on warfare and economics. They were investing in the well-being of their people. That's pretty forward-thinking for a medieval society. But what about the role of women? What was their status during the Song dynasty?
That's an interesting question. While Confucianism still placed men above women in the social hierarchy, women in the Song dynasty actually enjoyed more legal and social privileges than you might expect, especially when it came to property ownership.
Really? That's surprising considering the prevailing attitudes towards women at the time. How did that happen?
Well, as the Song economy boomed, dowries became increasingly substantial. This gave women more bargaining power within their families, and even some legal protections when it came to inheriting and managing property. There were also notable female scholars, poets, and even businesswomen who challenged traditional gender roles.
So it wasn't a completely patriarchal society. There was some room for women to assert themselves and make their mark. What about religion? What role did it play in Song Dynasty society?
Religion was deeply intertwined with everyday life. Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism all had significant followings, and folk religions with their myriad deities and spirits were also very popular. It was a true melting pot of beliefs and practices.
About a diverse religious landscape. And it wasn't just about personal faith. It influenced everything from festivals and celebrations to art, literature, and even government policy.
Exactly. The Song Dynasty was quite tolerant of religious diversity. They had sizable Muslim and Jewish communities and even some Christians. This openness to different beliefs probably contributed to their cultural vibrancy and intellectual curiosity.
It's amazing how much we've covered already, but we've barely scratched the surface of the Song Dynasty's achievements. We've touched on their military prowess and their flourishing society, but they were also renowned for their technological innovations, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely. The Song Dynasty was a golden age for science and technology in China. We've already talked about their gunpowder weapons and advanced shipbuilding techniques, but they also made significant strides in other areas like astronomy, mathematics, cartography, and engineering.
What were some of their most groundbreaking inventions, the ones that really make us go, wow, they did that back then?
Where do I even begin? They developed sophisticated astronomical clocks, invented the world's first compass for navigation, and even came up with the concept of the pound lock for canals, which revolutionized water transportation.
Those are some truly impressive achievements. It sounds like they were centuries ahead of their time.
They were pioneers in many ways. And let's not forget their advancements in printing technology. During the Song Dynasty, Bi Sheng invented movable type printing.
Movable type printing. Now that's a game changer. Wasn't that centuries before Gutenberg's printing press in Europe?
You're absolutely right. This invention made it possible to produce books much faster and cheaper than ever before, leading to a surge in literacy and the spread of knowledge throughout Chinese society.
It's fascinating how a single invention can have such a profound and lasting impact on the world. What other advancements did they make in mathematics and other fields?
Well, in mathematics, they made significant progress in areas like algebra and geometry. They even developed their own version of Pascal's triangle, long before it was known in the West.
Pascal's triangle. I vaguely remember that from math class. Something about combinations and probabilities.
You've got it. It's amazing how these mathematical concepts were being explored in China centuries before they became widely known in Europe. Their cartography was equally impressive. They created detailed maps using grids and scales, even producing raised relief maps to represent topographical features.
Talk about being ahead of the curve. It seems like the Song Dynasty was this incredible hotbed of innovation and creativity, pushing the boundaries of knowledge in multiple fields. What about architecture and engineering? Did they have any remarkable feats in those areas?
Absolutely. They built towering pagodas, some over 10 stories high, and massive bridges that spanned vast distances. Their engineering skills were unmatched, and their buildings were not only functional, but also works of art.
It's incredible how much they achieved in such a relatively short period, especially considering the challenges they faced. But you know what really intrigues me? The fact that they were also deeply interested in archaeology. They weren't just focused on the present and the future. They had a deep respect for their past.
Ah, yes. The Song Dynasty's fascination with the past is truly remarkable. They weren't just content with their own advancements. They wanted to understand and learn from those who came before them.
So they were history buffs like us. What did they do with these relics? Just display them in their homes?
It was more than just collecting for the sake of display. They saw these objects as tangible links to their past, and they were eager to decipher their meaning and significance. They were trying to understand their own place in the grand sweep of Chinese history.
That's a pretty sophisticated understanding of history for their time. It's like they were trying to have a conversation with the past to learn from the successes and failures of those who came before them.
Exactly. They even shifted their perspective on these relics, recognizing them not just as ceremonial objects, but as artifacts crafted by ordinary people in previous eras.
That's a nuanced and insightful approach to history. It's not just about kings and queens and battles. It's about the everyday lives of people, their crafts, their beliefs, their hopes and dreams.
Precisely. And there were key figures who championed this approach to studying the past. Scholars like Ouyang Xu and Zhaoming Cheng were pioneers in epigraphy and archaeology, meticulously cataloging and analyzing ancient inscriptions on stone and bronze. And then, of course, there was Shen Ku, the polymath extraordinaire.
Shen Ku, of course. It seems like he was involved in just about every field of study. What was his contribution to archaeology?
Well, he criticized those who saw relics simply as objects for rituals. He believed in a more critical approach to archaeology, emphasizing functionality and understanding the original manufacturing processes.
It sounds like he was a true pioneer, always pushing the boundaries of knowledge and challenging conventional thinking. It's incredible how much ground we've covered in this deep dive. The Song Dynasty was truly a remarkable period in Chinese history, filled with triumphs, tragedies, and a legacy of innovation that still shapes the world today. It's amazing to think about everything we've discovered in our deep dive into the Song Dynasty. From their military triumphs and maritime prowess to their vibrant cities and groundbreaking innovations, they've really left a mark on history.
It's a dynasty that deserves more recognition than it gets. Their story is one of resilience, ingenuity, and a constant pursuit of knowledge and advancement.
But with all these big stories about emperors and battles and technology, I think it's important to remember the everyday people who lived back then.
Totally. What would it have been like to walk those busy streets, to experience the sights and sounds of a Song Dynasty city, to be a part of all that culture and progress?
Let's imagine we're going back in time. Picture this. You step into a time machine, and you're suddenly in Kaifeng or Hangzhou, two of the biggest cities in the world back then, each with more than 1 million people.
You're walking through markets packed with goods from all over. Silks, spices, beautiful porcelain tea. It's amazing.
You see these skilled artisans working their magic, making these incredible things, street performers doing acrobatics, storytellers sharing tales that take you to other worlds.
And everywhere you look, there's something going on. Tea houses full of people talking hours. Restaurants with delicious food festivals, with lanterns and fireworks all over the city.
Sounds like they knew how to have a good time. And it wasn't just for the rich folks, was it? It seems like everyone could enjoy all this.
Exactly. The Song Dynasty really cared about people. The government had programs so even the poor had what they needed and could enjoy the city's culture.
And they really valued education, too.
Yeah.
Those imperial exams were tough, but it shows how much they wanted the best people running things, no matter where they came from.
Yeah, passing those exams meant everything. It opened doors to a whole new life.
Yeah.
And while money and connections probably helped, just having that system shows what they valued as a society.
And let's not forget about the women. Even with those Confucian rules, they had some freedoms, especially with owning property.
It reminds us that even in those old times, things weren't always so simple.
Now let's talk tech. We talked about their military inventions, but their other achievements are just crazy.
It's incredible what they could build. The Chinese odometer that measured distances, the south-pointing chariot with a gear system we still use in cars today, and Susong's astronomical clock tower. It's a masterpiece of engineering.
It's like they were looking into the future and inventing things we use now.
Totally. And don't forget about math maps and water engineering.
Yeah.
Their maps, canals, and that pound lock thing that moves boats up and down. It's genius.
They did so much with all the wars and problems they had.
They never gave up. It shows how creative and strong people can be.
And their interest in archaeology shows they respected history. They wanted to learn from the past.
Yeah, they weren't just happy with their own success. They wanted to understand what came before.
Like us digging into history, what did they do with all those old relics? Put them in their houses.
They wanted to learn from them. They saw those things as connections to their past, trying to figure out their place in history.
That's a really smart way of looking at history for that time. It's like they were talking to the past, learning from what worked and what didn't.
Right. They even started seeing these relics not just as religious things, but as everyday objects made by regular people.
That's a really interesting way to see history. It's not just kings and wars. It's about how people lived what they believed in and what they hoped for.
Exactly. People like Ouyang Xu and Zhaoming Cheng studied ancient writing. They were like detectives of the past. And then there's Shen Ku, the ultimate genius.
Oh yeah, Shen Ku, he was into everything. What did he do with archaeology?
He thought it was wrong to just see those old objects as religious things. He wanted to know how they worked and how they were made.
He was a real trailblazer, always pushing the limits and making people think differently. We've learned so much about this amazing dynasty. The Song Dynasty was full of highs and lows, but they left behind inventions and ideas we still use today.
They were all about progress and new ideas, and they loved knowledge and culture.
It makes you wonder what else they could have done if the Mongols hadn't taken over.
Maybe they would build even more amazing things, discovered new science, or even sailed across the oceans.
It's an interesting thought. But even though their time ended, their creativity lives on.
It shows us what people can do, even when things are hard. The search for knowledge and beauty never stops.
So we've come to the end of our deep dive into the Song Dynasty. What a journey.
I agree. It's been fascinating, and I hope our listeners enjoyed learning about this with us.
That's all for this episode. Keep exploring, keep learning, and stay curious.